blinding light. She's a sight to behold, sexy and powerful, brazen and bold. She's turning up for the fight, rooting out evil and shining so bright. Electric bolts from a stormy sky, leather wings of a dragon's flight. A psychic sword cuts through the night, a fiery heart standing ready to fight. Southern nights, they rise and soar. God in the south, yeah, they're ready to roar. From the shadows to the shining lights, that they'll protect you day and night. Southern nights.
And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, myopic proofreader for Critical Blast Publishing, head chief and bottle washer for Critical Blast Logistics, and sometimes we will help you with your data with Critical Blast services in that regard. Don't have a name for that yet. Didn't want to pay for another LLC. It's expensive. We are here tonight with Daerick Gross and Dennis Mallonee for the release of Heroic Publishing's new hardcover brick, and it's a brick of a book. I'm going to murder this because my Spanish is worse than Colin Farrell's. Murcielaga.
Murcielaga.
Murcielaga. See, that's how bad it is. And you know what? For a while, I was telling my business partner, says, "Yeah, we're doing El Murcielaga." I was like, "Wait, we're going to play that penguin scene from the Batman all over again." There,
Yes.
That's the worst Spanish I've ever heard.
I've heard
So,
worse.
so I know this much about it, and that's only because I've been publishing it. This was back in. It takes us back to the 90s, right? Or does it go back to the 80s?
Goes back further.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she is nearly 40 years old at this point. First appearance was 1988.
That's.
Yes.
She
I
doesn't
don't
look,
like saying 88 is old. Okay.
she doesn't look
88
a
was
day
like
over
a couple of years
25.
ago. It goes by so fast.
It does.
And of
It
course,
truly
she
does.
was created by your father.
By my father, Daerick Gross. Mm-hmm.
So I want to know more about him, and what other things he did. But we want to focus on this and whatever whatever you remember about what inspired the series
Sure.
and why he wanted to do it.
Okay, so I'll try to give you sort of the high-level background so we don't take up a ton of time because I could go on and on. And let me know if you have specific questions you want to deeper dive on. So my father, Daerick Gross, was a commercial illustrator for years and years. Started off at a newspaper in Cincinnati through the 70s, did some work, then moved over to a television station there locally, and was building up a commercial illustration career through the 70s. And started to break into clientele in Los Angeles. So we were living in Cincinnati. So we moved us out here in the late 70s. I say here, I'm not in LA right now, but moved out to LA area in the late 70s and started doing commercial illustration there in LA. Hollywood, he had a studio for quite a while and wasn't in comics. Spent nearly 20 years of a professional career before he entered comics. But sometime in the mid-ish, late-ish 80s, he ended up doing some work with a small company, CFW Enterprises, I think was the name of it. CFW did martial arts magazines, and they wanted to start putting out some like martial art themed comic strips within their magazines. And he submitted some character, Reiki Warrior. Reiki was just the name of the character, and got a strip in, and ultimately started art directing for them. And built up a whole series of superhero martial arts themed superheroes within that magazine set, along with several other stories. Several other artists and creators had work in there too. It wasn't just him. But within that particular universe, She-Bat was born. Murcielaga became a side character who became very popular and became a front character out of that. And then ultimately, by the time we get to the early 90s, started making her appearance as an individual comic of her own right, and partnered with Heroic to start with.
Yay.
So characters with bat in their name are like characters with X in their name. They really sell well in the comic book market.
It was interesting. I say we, but at the time I was still in high school when she was born.
Characters with bat in their name? You mean like Billy Batson?
Yes,
exactly. But when she was, I was in high school, late high school by the time she was born, and my dad was trying to be very careful of the bat theme, right? Like, DC owns bat everything, and you don't want to cross the lines there. So he's trying to be very careful. So he made sure he had some relationships and connections with DC. Specifically, it was I forget which editor there. I have to go back and look, but he was connected with one of the editors, and he had bounced off to make sure it was free and clear to do this. And so when he created her, he made sure that she had some superpower, some meta-human power of some kind that made her different from gadget-oriented Batman characters, and made sure that she didn't cross any of the lines that DC is very protective of. And so that's kind of how he created and evolved that character, and freely admitted that he was initially inspired from the old 1950s Batwoman, the short-lived Batwoman character from like the 50s, and then used that as an inspiration to create this character. So that's kind of where that came from when he was trying to noodle on different characters he wanted to create for this martial arts magazine, and what would ultimately become the Reiki Warriors through their independent comics in the 90s.
So I can see why, obviously you'd want to clear it with DC because, the Bat franchise is so huge. And in fact, they do have a She-Bat character, which is Man-Bat's wife.
They had, I don't know if they had She-Bat. I know they had obviously Batgirl, but they had Batwoman that they revived again in 2006 or so. They revived Batwoman again as a somewhat different reimagined character. I know the other She-Bat that existed parallel was Neil Adams' Valeria the She-Bat. And that was a conversation. I know my dad and Neil had some kind of a handshake on that because they were both being very protective of She-Bat as the titling. So that's where Murcielaga became the front and center titling, Murcielaga She-Bat, whereas, so that we weren't falling too hard on the She-Bat title, even though it's part of the name. So we were more leaning towards the Murcielaga. He was leaning more towards Valeria, and just making and completely different characters. So there was no confusion between the two characters.
But you actually had branding using it at that point. DC wasn't branding anything with it. The She-Bat they had was like a one-off character. It was like Man-Bat's wife used the Man-Bat.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Langstrom's character.
Yeah,
that's right. Yes, I forgot about that. So yes, but you're right. They hadn't branded anything around that at all. We had no, when my dad was talking with the DC editors at the time, had no collisions with that. And even so far as ultimately he did some work with DC in the early 90s, 93, 94, on a Batman graphic novel, a Two-Face, two-parter.
Let me toss a legal point at you.
Sure.
The only problem with, you can't trademark an X. You can't trademark a bat generically, right? You can trademark them for specific uses in specific media. And the concern about trademark law is lack of confusion. So Rick was on the right track to do things to distinguish Murcielaga from any Batman connection, giving her the hypersensitive hearing, the limited levitational abilities, completely different background, and focusing on the Murcielaga part of it, with She-Bat just as another part of the name, alleviated any problem that he might have had with DC attempting any sort of action, which doesn't necessarily stop people from doing it, but it's judges are not going to do anything about it if there's no confusion in the marketplace.
I did a deep dive article once with Bob Ingersoll on the whole thing about trademarks and superheroes and all that. It was educational, and you could give a week's worth of lectures on the phrase Captain Marvel alone. In that regard.
Yeah, well, Bob was smart, but he got a few things wrong. And I argued with him a couple of times over it, and he held his opinion. I held mine. So anyway.
It can be fun, but we got into things like why DC and Marvel can both have a Sandman, and why they can both have a Sabretooth. I said, so technically DC could put out a book called Arachnid Tales starring the Spider-Man. He's like, they could if they didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money in court.
Yeah.
As long as you're not branding with it, you're not trademarking something. But yeah, it's still a bad decision. So
here's a funny thing. You're talking about that. The word Superman is trademarked, registered trademark in the context of comic book and related merchandise, but that doesn't mean you can stop anyone from using the word Superman to describe a character. Doc Savage was a Superman, right? Long before Kal-El took on the name.
In fact, if you can show common use of it before the trademarking, you have a hard time getting trademarking. And I know that, I can't. Who's the guy who came before Doc Savage?
The Shadow?
No, not the Shadow. It was.
Who are you thinking of?
Oh, I hate this. Don't get old, Dennis. It sucks because I can throw this name out at the drop of a hat anytime I'm talking about the men before Superman.
Well, I could take it off and drop it if you want me to.
Gladiator. Philip Wiley's Gladiator.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the name of the book. The character's name. The character's name is different. Arn. No, that was his son.
Arn Monroe's father.
Monroe. Yeah, his last name was Monroe. I can't remember his first name.
It'll come to me later. But the thing is, the book was advertised in science fiction magazines as, the daring adventures of a lusty Superman.
Right.
And there was no character of Superman at the time yet. This was a decade prior.
Well, Man and Superman is the title of an essay by who wrote that? Philosopher.
Nietzsche.
Was it Nietzsche?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, yeah, but that's where the term Superman, as far as I know, was coined. Was in Nietzsche's essay. So, anyway, we're digressing.
You're deep in the weeds now.
Yeah,
let's
talk about Mega.
Yeah. So what would you like to know? I mean, so I gave you sort of the high level of how she was created and got us to the initial launch of her first, solo titles. What can I help fill in for some background for you?
Mega. Daerick once told me that he chose that name because it actually meant something in Spanish.
Well, so
your dad had a weird sense of humor.
Yeah. Okay. My dad had a very, very weird sense of humor. And so when the character was first introduced in the earliest versions, and she was just a side character, she wasn't intended to appear very much at all at first, just a side character. I believe the initial name she was given at the time was Mega Vergas, which translates loosely as basically big balls, if I'm not mistaken. my rusty Los Angeles Spanish. And he was just playing with names. He was just goofing around. It wasn't meant to be serious at all. And then found out that he had a character that was kind of cool, kind of popular. He started to like her, and he cornered himself into that name. So we at the time were talking about how do we change the name, make it something smarter, more intelligent. And so that's, where we bounced around some name options and whatnot. So we ended up making Mega a shortened name that her sister would use for a longer name. Margarita is where we landed as her full name. And we picked Socorro as a last name. So her name is actually Margarita Socorro. But Mega, we liked Mega as a short name anyways. It's just fun to have the nickname. So we kept Mega, and we definitely dropped the seventh grade humor out of that one pretty quickly.
Yeah, that reminds me of when the writers of the Batman series for television, 1966, they were known for like doing that kind of a humor thing and throwing things in, and then the producers getting angry afterwards. There was an episode where a sheik was coming to town, and the writer said, I gave him a name that was basically the street that I lived on and my best friend's last name. And it all went together kind of weirdly. And the producer's like, oh, no. You've done this to me too many times. You give that guy an Arabic name. So Sheikh Ibn Karib came to town, and every Arab child watching television said, they just said son of a bitch on TV.
That's hilarious. I had not heard that story before. That's awesome.
Oh, it's It was a fun show. But how Dennis, do we have all of the issues of She-Bat here, or are we just scratching the surface with the first?
You have all of the published issues of the She-Bat, all of the stories that appeared in the published issues of She-Bat in color are in this volume. There are a few other stories that were done in the 80s in black and white that have not yet been put into color. That was what Daerick and I were working on before he died. Little Daerick has said that once he has some time, right, he might very well like to go in and render those remaining black and white stories.
I would welcome an opportunity. I can't do that certainly at the moment, but there's a lot that I want to do with much of my father's legacy, and this is among the different things that I want to be able to go back and touch up on. I think it would be fun. He and I have done several commercial projects over the years together, and every chance I get where I can still touch and do like a duet with my father still is super awesome to do. So Dennis, I would welcome the opportunity at some point in the future where we could work together, take those old stories and colorize them.
Rick also tells me that there are some She-Bat stories that were written but never drawn. Like
that is correct.
Lolly may well have those somewhere unless she turned them over to you.
Well, I will check in with her on any that someone else wrote. I wrote a few drafts for several different stories for him, and I have those. That's actually a collection I'm starting to put together to revamp a few things. She's got her 40th anniversary coming up in a couple of years, and I'm trying to put together a project to put up new work, a new story, new art, and do something to commemorate 40 years. So that's a project I'm actively trying to assemble now.
So the answer to your question, RJ, is yes, there are other She-Bat stories that do not appear in this volume, but they're still works in progress.
I
Yes.
was going to say, we called this thing Volume 1. That kind of implies that more can follow this. So I wanted to make sure we named it correctly. I brought the screen up here just to show people this is a book that's already out there. I know a lot of people watch these shows and they're thinking, oh, crowdfunding, or somebody's putting something up and they're drumming up interest. Guess what? This one's done. It's out on Amazon in hardcover, softcover, and a nice little potable manga size. Yeah, it's potable. You can eat it. I'll drink it rather. It's portable.
Yes.
It's portable. You can take it on the airplane.
Printed on gingerbread and water.
It's nearly 100%, as Dennis said, of everything that's ever been published. So you'll see quite an evolution, I think, in terms of the growth in the storytelling and the art. You could see where, the earliest days when my dad was breaking into drawing the comics, and a lot of the early weaknesses he had is he had larger heads, or he'd have certain body quirks in the way he set things up. But then you see the strength over time, and the other artists we brought in really see an evolution in production value. I think this is a great collection to see not just her growth as a character, but the growth in the writing, the growth in just the overall production of everything. It's been really satisfying to see this book come together.
One word of caution in this: the stories are not printed in sequence of when they were originally published. They're printed in the sequence in which they appeared in the MURCIELAGA comic book.
Yes.
So you're going to see, stuff from the 80s interspersed with stuff from the 90s and, the 2000s in this.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. This is the stuff that was all through the collaboration that he had with Heroic. So this is everything within the Heroic issuing numbers, correct?
Right.
Like this is, so within that chronology.
You'll also see crossovers with some characters from the League of Champions in this volume. Flair makes a cameo appearance. Lady Arcane and Rose make cameo appearances. There's even a crossover with the League of Champions that was basically, the last thing that Daerick and I really were able to bring to completion. And I found that to be very satisfying because what we did on that was we took a crossover story that originally appeared in the martial arts magazine from the 80s, which featured Robo Warriors in it. And we basically redrew those Robo Warriors characters to be champions. And Rick and Henry Martinez did a wonderful job with that. I had to do some, fancy plotting in order to make the thing work properly, but I think it came out wonderfully well. Rick certainly said that he loved it. So
yes, he did. He talked about that. He was very excited to see, first off, a favorite story of his come back again, and then be able to bring that into the heroic world with the League of Champions. So I know he was very, very happy with that output.
And this takes place in the time frame of the Seoul Olympics,
yes,
which was 1988, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
So there are topical references in there, and it's really a fun story. Oh, we should give credit to Bradley Parker for this. The original idea was Rick's and Brad Parker's.
That is correct. Yeah, the Robo Warrior characters were Brad's, and I know the story itself was a collaboration. My sister and I helped on some of the story ideas at the time as well. But yeah, Bradley definitely needs credit to be given here, because it would not have come together without his input with his characters.
Now, I know this was this grew out of an ad from a martial arts agency that needed some strips. Was your father a big fan of martial arts in the first place, or become one?
No. No. He was not a martial arts kind of guy at all. I think part of it was there was a gig, and so, hey, let me see what I could do to be, to get in on that gig. And so he saw an opportunity. I think was really the chance there. Part of it was, hey, there's a chance to do comics, so he had his attention. There was ultimately a chance to help do some art direction and to help out and use a lot of his commercial art experience to work with them on that. He'd already done art direction for magazines before that, so he had a lot of experience. So I think he just saw that as an evolution of his commercial illustration career. Didn't realize at the time that it was going to help him step into comic books as his next phase of his career through the 90s.
He was, if I'm not mistaken, the oldest artist to win that newcomer. What was the name of that?
Russ Manning Award.
Russ Manning Award, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the stats on that, but he got the 1992 Russ Manning Award. He probably was the oldest at that time. It's been 30 years. I don't know if that's still a record he holds, but he was in his 40s at that point.
My eye keeps getting drawn to the design of the character, and I love it, but I keep reminding myself she's a martial arts character in a big flowing scalloped cape.
I could talk to that a little bit. So again, first off, the initial visual, she started out as a drawing, like literally. I don't think he was trying to create this bat themed martial arts character. He drew her and said, I want to do something with this. And as you can see, if you made this black and white, you could see a lot of relationship to connection to the old Batwoman from the 50s. The gold costume that she had and everything. Just he loved that character, and so he started working with that, and that's where this initial first draft came from. Her costume today looks nothing like this.
Absolutely.
But when he had to start finding ways to make sure this character was unique and not part of a Bat universe from DC, one of the powers that she was given was a very limited, weak, kind of a telekinesis. So she's able to somewhat levitate, and she's able to just slightly move things. And part of that was to explain keeping the cape out of her way. Like at some subliminal level, she's able to just make sure that, because when it's drawn, and when you see all the other drawings my dad did, it's always flowing. It's almost like Spawn. Like the cape is just doing its own thing. And that's been explained as her ability to just get it out of her way.
She likes the look of it, so that's why she kept it. But
yes, she does. Yeah, that's true. There was a point where she was almost going to get rid of the cape, but she decided to keep it. That's right. She, as the character, we explained, liked the look of it as well. There's a story, I think it's issue 3 from 1992 or whatever. Martin Powell wrote to help explain where she got that ability. So because she wasn't born with that, and it's something that she acquired. So that was from I think it was issue 3, the John Statama drawn book. Dennis, you might help me remember. I think it was that was
it was a 31-page story that we actually had to split into 2 parts.
Yes,
when we reprinted it in color in Murcielaga 17 and 18, maybe.
Oh, that was the reprint. Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah.
So the Martin Powell story helps explain kind of where she got that ability.
She's always had the hypersonic hearing. Right?
Correct.
And it was a problem for her when she was a child, because if you're a child and you can hear everything, right, you just kind of withdraw, right?
That was addressed in a story a long time ago, and when I watched the Man of Steel movie that came out in 2012, 13, they kind of touched on the same kind of thing, a child going through just having to deal with the world being so big, right? And mom saying make it smaller. And that was, it was funny watching that, saying like, we had the same thing. we did, and that was in our book. So that was kind of cool, and yet also made me feel very derivative, even though we came first.
Yeah, I've had that experience too. Eternity Smith came out before the Terminator, right? With many of the same themes that were in the Terminator movie, which kind of ticked me off a bit. You know, great minds.
We have a gross girl in the chat who I'm sure is no relation at all. Says that rule of cool is the strongest fundamental character design. And
hi, Maya.
If it looks good, keep it. And then special Edgar Alt says a really gross girl sent me here. So we're glad to have people here watching and paying attention to us. We don't do shows that often anymore, so it's good to see that we can still draw a little audience at least.
Yeah, but gross girl spells her name with 2 I's.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can ask her at some point why she's done that. I know who that is. But yeah, I know exactly who that is. Known her all her life.
Oh, okay. And you're a little older than she is.
I am a little older than she is by about 20 odd years.
Okay.
So there's always people, looking for the next big superhero project to mine and make more stuff out of. Netflix. Have you ever had any discussions with anybody for alternative media? I mean, Dennis, they would have to go through you, I guess.
No, they don't. Studio G owns Murcielaga. And in fact, there was a She-Bat video.
There was.
Which I think it's still up on the Heroic Publishing website.
Right. So yeah. So I have those digitized. So the explanation there is right around 2000 2001. My father had licensed out the character to a production company that was going to try to do some pitches for her to have a Spanish language TV show. So they shot a promo, 10-minute long promo, and then cut also a 2-minute trailer for the 10-minute promo. And then they put it out in English and in Spanish, and hired a couple of modern up-and-coming actors. And oddly enough, actually, John Taylor from Duran Duran is also in there when he was trying to get into some acting. So we had John Taylor in there, which is cool. And so, yeah, that made the rounds in the earliest of 2000s and didn't quite get picked up. But I know they were trying to shop it at, like, say, Univision or Telemundo, or see if they could find a TV outlet that would want to pick her up, and didn't quite come to fruition. But there was a long time where that video clip was available on, now I'm dating myself, Spike TV had that out. You could go to, before YouTube was the big place to go, Spike had a video website you could go to. And so she was up there for a while. But we found the old video VHS tapes. I've digitized them. So they're going to go up on the Studio G site soon. And I can, Dennis, make sure that you have them as well if you want to put those up.
I do have them. I think they're actually still up there on the Heroic Publishing website. But I'll have to check on that because I'm not sure.
So this was like a pilot episode of something?
Yeah, it wasn't a full. Yeah, I mean, it was a short, so it wasn't like a 30-minute show.
It was a proof of concept video.
Yeah,
and it's where the tattoo of the bat on her back came from.
Yes, so they deviated quite a bit from our character because they felt at the time that they could sell it if they made some changes. So we had, I remember, a few friendly but challenging conversations about wanting to do this with her and do that with her. So she looks quite a bit different in this video version, but they did come up with that concept of this really great bat tattoo, like all on her whole back was covered, and so we kept that. So the character now has that from that. So that was
one of the things that I was reminded of initially when Dennis said, "Hey, Murcielaga is available here. Why don't we do this one next? I'm like, cool, great. And I looked at the character. I'm like, hey, Latin bat character. There was totally, in violation of copyrights and trademarks and everything, a Mexican film, Batwoman, which
Yes.
is quite a notorious watch, and I've not ever seen it other than clips. I'd love to see it. I see mostly the movie posters, and I don't know where I was going with that, other than to say, hey, that's what this reminded me of initially.
Fair enough. I've never seen that, so honestly, I don't know if there's any connection there or not. That's something that I want to go look at now. You got my interest.
Oh, it was a 56. Oh, see, Misty 3K did it. So,
okay.
It was basically she's wearing the Batman mask but running around in a bikini.
Oh, I'm in.
Yeah. What more plot do you need?
Ghost Girl says MST3K did an episode of it.
Yep.
Yeah, Misty 3K. That would be right up their alley. So I'm sure it's available on VHS or DVD somewhere. Look at me looking for a VHS tape. God,
I will not be looking for it on VHS.
No, don't do that. It's
bad.
It's streaming somewhere. Hey, look, it's on YouTube right now. Well, now we can all go watch it. Let's just share the stream. Again, folks, Murcielaga, not L, not La, even just Murcielaga. She-Bat.
Yeah,
is available, collected, all the issues from Heroic in hardcover, big hardcover. Wish I had it in my hands right now. I don't. It just came out last week. Big soft cover, and of course the manga size that you can take with you and read everywhere. That's your reading copy. You want to get both, or at least all three.
Have you sent Daerick a copy yet?
No, I haven't got any ordered. That's how bad and how far behind. Oh, Dennis, I'm so far behind right now that I will never die.
Well, that's a good life insurance policy, then, I guess.
Well, yeah, we're put on Earth to accomplish a certain number of things, and right now I'm so far behind that I will never die. So, I take comfort in that. Yeah, I've got to order that. I've got to order you copies of Flare 2. I got Flare 2 at least on the way to me. So
that's cool.
We'll get
Flare every Sunday?
Flare every Sunday. Yeah, in fact, I don't have every version of Flare 2. I hope you'll forgive me on that one. I just ordered the hardcover and the Flare every Sunday hardcover. But I'll get those out to you ASAP. A lot of my behindness problems are because I decided to go legit and actually operate under an LLC instead of a sole proprietorship. And I'm going to tell my accountant, like, we're going to go back to single proprietorship or I'm going to fire you. This was your idea.
There's a lot of problems with corporate structure, but there are benefits from it too.
Well, when it was a sole proprietorship, it's like, oh, I need to do something. Here's money. And now it's like, oh, the publishing company needs to do something. Well, the publishing company doesn't have any money right now. The logistics company's got a bunch of money, but they can't pay that part.
Yeah, there
you got to keep them separated.
Now we're really sidetracked. We're talking about corporate law. Good God.
No,
I got your music reference, though, RJ. So thank you.
Yes.
Oh
so,
my goodness.
Have there? I know we asked if there was more Murcielaga, and there is, but is there more Murcielaga? As in, is anybody talking about new stories, modern era, current setting?
Right. So that's kind of where I'm trying to head right now. So I have my own life. I've got small kids, a full-time job. So I'm trying to, within that, navigate her 40th anniversary coming up, where I am trying to put together a whole new story, new art, start that as a launch to go into future state, right? I'm setting up the scenario that allows us to go into a more modern take on the story without doing anything that changes anything in the past, and just how do we maintain and honor the history while we go ahead and step forward into a more modernized view of this character. So the 40th anniversary story should address all that. And then with that, moving forward is the plan. It's a plan on paper, written in crayon, so we'll see how permanent that is. But that's where we're headed. So yes, there are future plans brewing right now as we speak.
I should tell you, Daerick, that I had the same issue when we started publishing the material, from the 80s in the contemporary time period, because your dad was sort of kind of ignoring the older material when he started doing new stories, which I thought, wasn't necessary. So I had a conversation with him about that. And I think I persuaded him that you don't ignore it, right? you just don't deal with it, which is not quite the same thing, right? If there's something out of the past that you don't feel comfortable with it, don't reference it. That's what you have to do. That's all you have to do.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And so I think I've got a pretty good story outline in terms of how we can handle that, right? What things do we not address, or other things how we preserve, and then how do we look forward and try to do things in a way that doesn't, confound everything or make everything muddled. So I think I've got a pretty good treatment going, and so I'm working on that now. So with luck, as we get to 2028 and the 40th anniversary comes out, that is intended to be a launch into a new future. Yes, to your question.
Same character and all the history?
Yes, same character and all the history will be canon preserved. It won't be, close the book on one and reinvent. We're not doing a new 52, nothing like that. But there'll be a way that we can say that this is a history that exists, and we honor it, we treasure it, and this is how we can step forward into a more modern age and moving into the future without being tied down in any way.
Yeah. When you actually bring in real world events into a story or real world people, it does tend to suddenly put a spike in it saying you belong in this time now. But you have Superman meeting Kennedy, and you have Superboy meeting Kennedy in different stories, and
fighting Hitler.
And fighting Hitler, yes. So it's
don't worry about it. They're stories, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's comic book people.
I think comics, well, I think storytelling in general has lost the idea that you can have. It doesn't have to be perfectly canonical, and yet you can still somewhat reference, and these things are truisms of the character over time. So like you have a history that develops, and yet you have part of this old story that doesn't, like you said, Dennis, doesn't matter. Like it's not really like Superman today didn't fight Hitler, but that story exists, so we can enjoy it for what it is, and we can take it out of context, and it's still fine. And it doesn't need an Elseworlds, it doesn't need Earth 3 or whatever to explain it. It's just a comic book, and we loved it then, and now it's old.
The Justice Society was given so many reasons why they're still vital in fighting crime in their 90s instead of retiring. And I enjoy the Marvel movies, but if I start discussing them on panels at conventions, I get frustrated because I'm like, Howard Stark was helping fight Hitler, and his son Tony is 30 today.
Don't worry about it. For God's sake, right?
Yeah.
I've gone over this with Roy Thomas too, right? Roy likes to make everything canonical, and that's fine, right? But in the context of the history of the character, right, it's canonical. It doesn't mean that the Superman of today actually fought Hitler. It means that the character fought Hitler. That's all you need to say, right? He was around. That character was around in the 1940s, right? So go with that.
Yeah, it's not necessarily part of the story now.
No, it's not part of the story now. It's part of the character's history.
Now there are other characters in She-Bat's world.
Yes.
Obviously the heroic characters had crossed over at some point, but you have other characters among the Reiki warriors, and I'm going to guess outside of that even. Is there any thought about giving them room to grow as well and becoming their own?
Yes. So for Future State, yes, this is I'm using Murcielaga as the flagship. She became Studio G's primary character, the one that had the most popularity, the largest fan base of any of the characters. So I've been digging through a lot of my father's old stuff, concepts, ideas that never fully launched, trying to find which characters have a ground to stand on today. These were all created in the 80s and the 90s. Some of them were very rooted in stories of that day, Black Watch being among them, very much a story out of the late 80s, AIDS conversation, socially speaking, which has relevance, but is a different comment today in 2025 than it was in 1988 and 89. So there's a review being done right now over some of these characters and which ones can exist today or have to be adapted or adjusted in a way to give them better ground to stand on. And honestly, where can I take some of those characters and bring a little bit of my own vision to them? Because I don't want to just take my dad's stuff and say, here's my dad's stuff. I want to take stuff that's Studio G's. And today I'm Studio G, you know, and so how do I make some of these characters vibrant, alive, and my own in the way that they were his own at those times? So there are going to be some of them. I haven't fully fleshed it all out, so I'm kind of being a little vaguish, but I want to answer your question. Yes, the world of Studio G characters will still persist, but some of those characters may or may not have quite the life that they used to have.
Character called Shred appears in a cameo in one She-Bat story.
Shred.
And Rick promised there would be more stories about that character.
I may or may not honor that promise. Shred was definitely a fun character for its moment in time. A skateboard themed vigilante, you know, this really cool looking skull mask that it just was a fun, but very specific niche kind of a character. So if I'm not saying he won't exist or persist, but I doubt I'd give him his own title. So we'll see what we do with Shred. But definitely a fun, quirky character. That I have an affinity for Shred, but I don't know that it's very marketable today.
There is one you're talking about retconning and stuff like that. There was a big difference in the way Gams was originally presented. One of the She-Bat villains, a woman who had iron hard legs, long iron hard legs, kind of looked like Lucille Ball.
Yes.
And in her first appearance, she was wearing a wig, right?
Yes.
And in her subsequent appearances, it was pretty clear that she was not wearing a wig. So that was one of the conversations that Rick and I had. How do you reconcile that? And my suggestion to him, which he said he would actually act on, although we never got around to it, was that the reason she was bald back in her first appearance was because she had just received her powers and the treatment had left her bald, right?
That kind of stems from a conversation that I had with him about her origin and who she is and whatnot. So
you had the same conversation?
I had a similar conversation. I don't know if it was exactly the same, but we did talk about Gams and you know, kind of, because again, this is another character that he created because it was cool, and then had to write a story that said, how did we get to be cool? You know, how did this happen? So rather than starting with a character that evolved and now this is the character, he said, I want this. And now I got to write a story that gives me this. And so that's how Gams came to be. So we talked about her a bit. And I think what you would see probably tracks with what your conversation was with him.
Okay.
Dennis,
was there another? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I wasn't going to go anywhere else with it. I'm sitting thinking, Dennis, you're more familiar with the history of the character than I would be because you lived with it for 40 years nearly. What would you say were what are some of the highlights of the character's growth that people would see in this book?
Well,
Question.
that is an interesting question.
Did the 3-issue flip book make it in? Oh, go ahead. You go.
It's the backstory that Rick developed for the character that's interesting. You know, in her mother's first appearance, she's not the same as the mother as she appeared in her later appearances. Daerick, you can probably go into that a little bit better than I do, because I mean, it's not the same character.
No, what was interesting though is that he wanted to ground the character as a real person. You know, gave her secret identity and a job. Everybody gets that. But then we see her interacting with her mother from the earliest stories and having that relationship. And I think that's part of, to your question here, the growth and evolution of the character is as we see their exchanges and how her mother is involved and helps with some of the character development and the story development through some of these. And that's why I was asking if you had the 3-issue flip book. I think those stories were included here because there was one where the mother was involved quite a bit more too. And we see, I think, a better character depth that goes between the two of them once we get to those sets of stories from the earlier, you know, late 80s, early 90s stuff. So I think that would be an interesting thing, just to see the dynamic between the two. Mom isn't necessarily Alfred, but on the other hand, is there as an advisor, is able to bring a new context and looking at a problem, is there to be support. Yeah. So
and to give coaching advice, like looking in the telephone book to find someone she's looking for.
Yeah, just grounded common sense stuff. But so his reference, one of the earlier stories, Shebat, so Murcielaga, she's on the case trying to find, the big bad businessman, kingpin kind of guy that's running all the drugs in the area. And she knows it's the guy. She's got to figure out how to get to him. And Mom's just like, well, he's a businessman, right? Like, he puts on a face of a businessman and he's a legit dude to the public. Look him up. And she's like, oh, duh. Like that's what Dennis is referencing. It's just sort of that, common sense response. Don't overthink the thing that, that we had. Shebat would go into this little bit of, a lot of dialogue in her own head and, could overthink an issue. And so I think Mom was meant to be that grounding point, to just, snap out of it.
I'm trying to bring up the page on our website, because right now I'm showing the Amazon page where, you can get the book there or anywhere else that the books are sold. Is just say, hey, I want Murcielaga. And
hey, there's even an eBay listing for it.
How did that happen?
I put that up there.
I got to put this number in here to get the page to open up. That's what my phone is out for. I don't normally bring my phone out on shows, so 693. But the reason I want to bring it up on the Critical Blast bookstore is because, hey, first of all, it's cheaper. And here we go. Share this tab instead. Oh, I got to tell it. By the way, all the books used to be only available in the U.S. Now they're available in the U.S. and England. So I've got to pick my...
Not just England, the entire United Kingdom.
Exactly. So here it is. If you can get it for $64.99 from our site. Now, you may think, well, I want to make sure that, I don't want to cut Daerick out or anything like that. The creators, they actually get more money if you buy it from us, because we're cutting out the middleman. You're saving money. He's getting more money. So, if you want to go to criticalblast.com and click on that bookstore tab and pick one of the Murcielaga options there, you're actually,
Actually, the money's not going to Daerick. The money's going to go to his mom.
My mom. So every time you buy this book, you're helping out a sweet old lady who's lost her husband, and all the proceeds for this go to her. So please buy the book. Make my mommy happy.
And make sure Mom has a PayPal account so we can do that.
Oh, yeah. Daerick, you got to give, whether you want the money to go through you or directly to Lolly, right? You got to give that information.
We'll sort that out offline. I don't want to bore the audience with all that. Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, you can save, a good $6 just buying it straight from us there.
You give me the money, and I'll make sure she gets the money. It's okay. I'll make sure she's fine. Yeah. She'll be taken care of. It'll be good. Just give me the money.
Exactly.
It'll go straight to Mom. Yep.
Okay. Is there anything else that we should talk about or have we kind of exhausted this at this point?
I think we might have exhausted it.
Well,
I hope not.
I think, honestly, I just want to make sure that RJ has all his questions asked, because he's coming into this, I think, as maybe much of the audience is, who is this character? Why do I care about this character? So do you have any other questions? Anything else we can delve in on to kind of round out a little bit of her history or how she was made? Or
I will mention here that Daerick always presented Murcielaga as being very impulsive, right? Yes, she is an impulsive hero who invariably thinks that she's doing the right thing, even if it turns out that maybe she isn't.
She's a woman of action. So so while she may go into over processing sometimes in her head, she doesn't try to plan. She doesn't over plan. It's like, act now, adjust as you go.
That's, how I do things all the time.
So RJ, I guess my question back to you is what else about this character would you like to know, or my father, or the universe she comes from, or any of that? Just what can I do, since you're sort of new to this character, to round out your understanding of who she is, and why you should buy this book?
Well, people should buy the book because it's a cool looking character who, is a martial artist. I know that there are, the reason I asked about the cape is I know there's people, Mike Barron, who is real, has a keen eye towards martial art characters and whether or not they're actually performing martial arts in a still frame of fighting. And I know that a cape would definitely get in the way of that, but you've explained that away with just a minor superpower that doesn't really do much good except keep your cape out of the way.
So I'll say this: my father was not a martial arts aficionado. When you look at the book, if you are looking at this saying, "I want to see a martial arts, karate, kung fu, whatever character," you're not going to see that. All right. So remember, we started her in those books for those magazines back then, but she's straight up just a superhero, and so she's always been presented. Any fight scene, any action sequence, acrobatics, flips, all that stuff, but will be as almost any other superhero book you're going to read. So if you're going into this saying, finally, a true martial arts representation, no, you're going to be disappointed. That's, my father did, he may have tried a couple places here and there, but he did not have any background with martial arts and would not have represented her in a very perfect way for someone who's coming into this saying, I love martial arts and I want to see my style of martial arts represented. That won't be the case here.
But he did love dinosaurs.
Oh, he did love dinosaurs, and he spent a lot of time on those, laboring love over those dinosaurs in the frames. Yes, he did.
So he got the job by answering an ad for that martial arts company, which we've already talked about. But
yes,
once he was rolling, got the ball rolling. Do you know about when people started approaching him from other established comics companies? You mentioned he did some work for DC. Did he fish for that, or did they come to him? And which ones did he do?
That comes along more after the martial arts magazine. So the martial arts magazine was his intro, and he was learning. Basically, had to teach himself sequential repetition. Doing a comic book is drawing, and getting himself into that mode from doing illustrations to doing a bunch of illustrations.
And that was very difficult for him.
It was. Yeah. He was seriously ADHD and didn't know that at the time, and untreated and everything. And so his ability to focus on repetitious sequential art was very challenging for him. So ultimately, getting to where you're going with this, RJ, he ended up working with Innovation Comics and David Campetti, and did the Vampire Lestat. And if you remember back then, and initially he was coming in not as the artist, he was painting over another artist at first. And I don't know the whole story of how things shifted around, but ultimately he became the artist and the painter for the 12 issues of the Vampire Lestat graphic novel series. And that was the launching pad that got him notoriety, got him handshaking with all these other comic outlets, DC, Marvel, I think some Image work. So he ended up doing quite a bit of a comics career in the 90s, but is more to the Vampire Lestat and Innovations work than it was from the Studio G stuff with CFW the martial arts magazines.
Yeah, it was Vampire
Lestat. I read that book.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was your dad's artwork on it. I just remember it was a very painted style, and that's what made it jump off the stand to me. I had not even read the Anne Rice books, so this was my first introduction to the character.
Right, and that was the launch of his comics career, was Vampire Lestat. And then he also did with Innovation. There was, I think, 4 issues of Forbidden Planet, adapting the Leslie Nielsen movie from the 50s. And then there were some more Anne Rice adaptations where he did either some of the interiors or he did the covers. And then from there, he started getting other work. And the DC reference that I made, the Two-Face Strikes Twice, was a 2-parter graphic novel, flip book kind of style, with an old 1940s feel for it, and then a retelling of that in a modern era. And so my dad did the modern versions, painted style the same way. and he did some Marvel work. Speaking of Captain Marvel, the 90s Captain Marvel through Marvel Comics, he did a couple issues of that. And just that was sort of the whole launch of that career. Blood Wolf was another big one he did through the 90s, and lots of appearances throughout all sorts of comic companies throughout the 90s.
Gross Girl has a question. Is this addressed to me or to you, Daerick?
What was the
What was
first
the
project?
first project you and he did together?
Okay, so maybe it's for both of us, Dennis. Do you want to answer it first, and then I'll answer it for me?
Daerick first came to my attention, as a result of the CFW work. He was recommended to me as a potential artist for our illustrated fantasy and science fiction magazine fantasy book. Right, so I went there with my art director Nick Smith to his studio, the basement studio where he wandered around naked all the time, which is a bit startling.
TMI.
Oh, he was branded on that. Real quick side note: my dad branded himself on that. He was known as the naked artist through the '80s, late '80s in Hollywood. So just you say TMI, that was branding. So go ahead, Dennis. I'm sorry.
But it seems like Gross Girl is actually addressing that to you, Daerick.
Probably so.
But that pretty much covers it. After that initial contact, I took a liking, in particular, the She-Bat character, and eventually broached the idea of putting the She-Bat into her own magazine, which is where that came from.
So for me to address that question, where did I first work with him? Like kind of that duet comment that I mentioned earlier. On a professional level, my sister and I were story contributors, idea generators through some of these earliest comics in the 80s. So I would say late 80s, especially that dinosaur story. My sister and I both had some ideas thrown in there. But in terms of actually brush in hand doing artwork where he and I were working together, Vampire Lestat. There were some pages, again, my dad's ADHD being what it was, he often had issues with schedules and timing. And so he was falling a bit behind on some things. And my then wife at the time and I were both, we were both art school majors. We had a background in arts and painting, and we ended up helping him paint some of those boards, a lot of the backgrounds, some character touch-ups. So yeah, Julie and I did quite a bit of work on, I think, issues 5 and 6 or something. I forget which one's in that series. But Vampire Lestat, to answer the question, is where my dad and I first did a cult almost apprentice style with him professionally.
We froze up there. See, when you said the first place my dad and I, and then it just froze. I was like, well, that's
awesome. So, okay, let me try that again. I'm sorry for anyone else that didn't freeze. You're going to hear it again. Here we go. So the first place where he and I really worked together professionally was through Vampire Lestat. So he had struggles with ADHD, which led him to be often late on timing. And so he was rushing through some things. And so there was a point where my then wife at the time and I, both art school majors, were assisting with painting some of the backgrounds and some of the main panels throughout the series of the Vampire Lestat. So Julie and I both worked quite a bit to help get some of those pages done for him. So that was the first time I professionally worked with my father on something that saw print. So that's that question. So can you flash the question again? Was there something else in that, or did I cover it?
No, that's pretty much.
Okay. And we learn
what
lessons did I learn?
With you into Murcielaga.
All right. So what lessons did I learn? Okay, one, take realistic time commitments as opposed to just saying yes, I can do that. So that's one lesson that I learned. So have an honest conversation with my ability to do something before I commit. So that's one lesson that I learned professionally. But more, here's something he would talk about a lot. That is to take the time as part of the process to double check yourself. When my father would rush is where he'd make the most mistakes. And so when I see my father's work, as gorgeous as it would be, I can find all the blemishes and say like, oh, that just makes, don't do that, because he was rushing. And so taking that time to check yourself. And, he used to teach me all these different things that he would do, like, because old school, he would draw on tracing paper first, flip it back and forth, make sure that all the slants were taken out so things looked correct, those kinds of things to check yourself. And in his case, your head sizes, is the proportion correct? Because he'd always have these large heads on these teeny tiny little bodies. And, or when he's really rushing, these strange contortions, the way the body can't actually physically move, but he had these really strange hip twists and placements when he was rushing. So that would be one of the main lessons that I would say that I learned from him, that I would impart, is build in to your process the time to check yourself. That's part of the process, to make sure that you're putting out the strongest work you can.
Let me also add to that, go back. Let it sit for a little bit, then go back and look at it with fresh eyes.
Indeed. And I know we all take time, projects with deadlines that we have to rush, but the idea is to try to build in as much of that time ahead as you can, so that you're not rushing, so that you can put out gorgeous work that doesn't have weaknesses in it.
All right. Well, that, I think, brings us to the top of the hour, and a little bit beyond it. We've got a full show.
Yay!
Yay!
I'll just reiterate, folks, the book is available on Amazon, which means you can get it wherever books are sold. Go to your comic book shop and take the ISBN number with them and say, hey, can you get this book? And they'll say, that's not in our system. Get enough people to ask that, it'll get in their system. They'll get it in. But you can get it wherever books are sold.
Support your local comic shop.
Support your local comic shop. We want, as much as we want to make all the money ourselves, we're not that greedy. We want to, to help the system out there. Is there a
give my mom money? Give my mom money. Buy that book.
Yes. Get mom some money. You know what? I'm going to put this chat link out there into the chat right now. This is our bookstore chat, and it's just www.criticalblast.com. And if you just go there, there's a tab right at the top of the page that says bookstore. Click that. Boom. There's every book we put out. You just want to scroll down to the graphic novel section. Find the MURCIELAGA book you want. Do you want the soft cover that, will fit with all your other trades? Do you want that hard cover that you want to put on the coffee table for company to ooh and ah over? Or do you want that manga size that you can slip in your book bag and take with you to the next comic convention while you're reading on the trip? Get them all three.
You can also order Flair in the Southern Nights.
Absolutely. Flair, Southern Nights, the Morgan Wars. That's Flair, Southern Nights, X-Thieves. Southern Nights, let me tell you, that's only available in hardcover right now. And, that's 1,150 pages of hardcover book. You can take out an intruder into your house with that.
What else we have? We've got the Captain Thunder archive, if you're a Roy Thomas fan. Yeah.
And, we got the Flair every Sunday. I'm sure we've got something else coming down the hopper here. We got to get that Morgan Wars into softcover so it fits in with the rest of the League of Champions. It's technically League of Champions Volume 6 for those of you who've been collecting the trades. And we want to make sure that, your collection stays consistent. You don't want to have volumes 1 through 5 and then suddenly 6 is a hardcover standing out at a different size. No.
Yes, you do. You want both.
Want both, which means, Dennis, that we're going to have to go back and do 1 through 5 in hardcover for you. So,
yeah, we can probably arrange that.
Yeah, let's do it.
I've got guests coming over in about 30 minutes. So,
well, then let's get this out the door. Daerick, Dennis, so glad we got a chance to sit and talk with you guys. Request it at your public libraries too. Libraries are the best sneaky sales we can get because they've got government money to spend.
Yeah,
deeper pocket.
Thanks, RJ.
So,
Thanks, Daerick.
Thank you guys for coming. We
guys.
will end the stream and hope to see you all again soon. Good night.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.